Hello and welcome back to No Longer Legally Detained, the podcast about life after the psych ward. How do you navigate being an adult when you never expected to be one? So yes, this is the much anticipated relaunch of the podcast. I think there's been a few dates I've been throwing around, but I really wanted to practice what I preach, look after myself, look after my mental health, and also make sure that this podcast was sustainable and it was giving out the message that I wanted and was, done really properly. And so although things, are never going to be perfect, and that's something that I'm working on, my need for perfectionism, also sometimes it's important to take time and to also really look after yourself. But here we are back, and I am so excited. So in today's episode, it's going to be a bit of a different episode to normal. It's going to be kind of just talking about what is legally detained. Still can't speak, so it's going well. Who am I? What do I do? Where have I been? And then at the end of today's episode, I will also give a little bit of a structure of the podcast going forward and what you can expect from here. So to those who are new, who are just tuning into the podcast, hello, my name's Hannah. I am in my mid-20s. I am autistic with a pathological demand avoidance profile. I also am ADHD and I have struggled with my mental health. I spent 5 years in and out of inpatient hospital. I've also struggled with an eating disorder, amongst other things. I had to drop out of school due to my mental health and then kind of felt very lost. I was definitely an academic perfectionist. I'm probably a perfectionist in all aspects of my life. And I put a lot of pressure on myself to kind of comply with what I believe were societal norms. And that led me to a very dark place. And since kind of getting out of hospital, I went on my own journey of self-discovery. And through that journey, this podcast came about, my blog came about, my activism, and also my absolute love for creativity. So it's been a journey. Life is a journey. And as part of my journey, I am so honoured and excited to be able to share aspects of my journey, to be able to create spaces where people can feel hopefully listened to, heard, validated, and also be part of creating change within our systems. So if I was going to put a label on it, I would label myself a creative activist. I'm lucky enough to combine both of my two most favourite things in the entire world, creativity and activism. I'm a passionate advocate for social change, neurodivergence, mental health, young people, true inclusivity, amongst many other things. And I'm really lucky that I've worked with over 25 organisations, starting back in 2020 when I joined Mind and their Youth Voice Advisory Panel, to all the way up until today, of starting my own podcast and having a blog, sharing my journey online on social media. So I'm an actor, artist, dancer, musician, facilitator. So basically I'll do anything creative that I can get my hands on. And I'm currently now doing a degree in inclusive performance, and I did a foundation in musical theatre last year after a long break from education, which was very well needed. I play a multitude of instruments, including the egg shaker, which is my latest addition to my musical collection. I'm very excited. And I have found that music is just a language that I can really connect to. And I think all forms of creativity is such a powerful way to communicate. And I'm really passionate about not only using creativity in your own journey of like self-discovery and identity and finding out like who you are and what things mean, also as a form of escapism, of a way to just take yourself away from the constant, buzz of society and the how we live in this modern age, but also as a really important tool in fighting for change and using creativity as a tool for activism. The episodes, we will get into more of my creativity and more about who I am. I am the classic definition of an ADHDer who rambles and goes off on many tangents, and I'm trying to do better this time because as someone who edits their own podcast, I did not have enough time to be going off on all of my tangents. So we're going to see if Hannah can try and be a little bit more concise. We'll see. It's a goal. We all need goals in life. To start this launch episode with explaining a bit about Legally Detained, to give a bit of context and kind of show where like I've come from, where this has come from, and kind of where we're hoping to go with this podcast. So where did Legally Detained come from? It is a pretty wild name. And it came from when I was stuck in a psychiatric intensive care unit on a section 3 back in 2019. And it was actually another patient who suggested that I just bit the bullet and made a blog. And I'd been kind of wanting to create a blog for quite a long time. I'd dabbled within the kind of social media mental health community back in like 2015, which was not at all a healthy or good place to be, but it did give me the beginning roots of like wanting to maybe kind of share positively being the operative word, kind of parts of my journey and my story. I think I've always been a storyteller. I've always been someone who enjoys that. I guess as a performing arts student now, like it kind of makes sense. So I've kind of thought about a blog, but I was too terrified to even contemplate doing anything like that. But when we were talking about it with this patient, the only name I could think of was Legally Detained. Like I did love it, but I also was like, sure, like no. And I think people who've only met me now would think that I'm quite an out there, confident, outgoing person, which I am a lot more now. If you met the kind of person before, the person who before I went into mental health inpatient was such a different person. And I think anyone from my childhood who met me now would be quite shocked, I think, because I was so quiet. I didn't say anything. I wasn't, this outgoing, bubbly, just says whatever comes to her head. I was the complete opposite. So the person who created this blog was still very much at the beginning of that kind of self-discovery journey. But the other patient, let's just say we were both quite poorly at the time, did love it and was like, just go for it. And obviously I did. So I can't remember exactly the kind of timeline between the two, but then I did create, I think it was in 2020, so probably about 6 months later, I did create my first blog. I actually came off social media and created my blog during lockdown. And then 5 years later, here we are. So my blog has changed onto a different site because who knew creating a website was so tricky? I don't know, very hard. But it is, and again, I'm actually updating my website as well. It's kind of side tangent there. But back in 2019, I was a confused, scared, and very lost little human whose only goal in life was self-destruction. And I felt no one understood me. I felt there was no hope of change. And it's been a very wild and rocky journey since then. It's not been smooth sailing at all. And although, life is never perfect, and I think that's something that is really important to state. And although I do not share my whole journey, although I know people have said to me I'm so open, and I am really open, and I really pride myself on being authentic because I think it's so important. For me, like seeing all of these other people's lives was that I just felt was so out of reach, really affected my own kind of mental well-being. But in the same breath, like this is obviously do not share my whole life online or in a public domain. So as much as I do share, and everything I do share is completely authentic and honest and true, there will always be bits that I don't share. And I think that is just something that's important to state. But kind of the journey that I've been on is one that I could never have comprehended. And I've stumbled onto a path that I never even knew existed, leading me to doing things that I never imagined possible. And I think that is so exciting. And I think if I spoke to little Hannah about the things I do, she would have been like, oh my goodness, like I would never have imagined that these were the things that I'd go on to do. I never even realized these were jobs or these were possibilities. So it's kind of a completely crazy journey that it's been on. But I wanted to create a space of unapologetic authenticity, a place of no set road with people who are not afraid to tread the path less trodden. I want to be a voice for the little me that needed someone so badly when she was younger, to be loud about the things which matter and that are important. I from my blog, which I created, into the podcast is actually like quite a beautiful metaphor, I guess, of reflecting my own personal growth journey. Navigating life is something that none of us were prepared for, and the blog started when I was in hospital, quite literally legally detained. And the podcast, although this is the relaunch, even when I first launched the podcast, I was a very, very different person who'd created such a different life and am no longer legally detained, hence the name. And in modern society, the comparison that can happen is just really tricky, and it can often leave us feeling inadequate. And after spending a long time locked away from society, institutionalized, growing up undiagnosed, neurodivergent, and other events from within childhood and navigating adulthood, it just became so complicated and tricky. And I wanted to share a bit about how I've navigated this. And to preface, like before, I am not a doctor or a medical professional, and these are just my experiences and my opinions. And it is important to remember that you should always do what is right for you, not to copy anybody randomly off the internet, to listen to your doctors and people like that. But here is just, I have found kind of in life that the best bits of advice I've been given are like from lots of random people, and I've taken bits of them and then applied them to what works for me. I think it's about cherry picking kind of what is useful for you. We're all so different and like individual and unique, and all of our circumstances make up who we are and how we view the world and how we react to things. And therefore there's never going to be a one size fits all, but actually the more voices that we can hear, the more different experiences that we can hear, we can then take bits of all of those and apply them to ourselves. And that is hopefully kind of what I want to be sharing with the podcast. Is this is not a how to get your life from being on a psych ward to not being on a psych ward. That's absolutely not what this is. This is just some of the me just rambling about ways that I have kind of coped, ways that I've navigated things, what I'm doing. It's by no means scientific, but in some ways that is the beauty of kind of the online community that we do have now. Although it comes with a lot of challenges and a lot of difficulties, we can hear so many different people's stories and experiences and things that they've done. And while that can lead to comparison, it also can lead to us going, oh, that's really interesting, they've done that, that wouldn't work exactly that way for me, but I could maybe pick those bits and then apply things to myself. So that is kind of a bit of a background of Legally Detained, and onto kind of No Longer Legally Detained, the podcast. Although I do very much have a plan, I think the wonder of this is that I have no idea really where it's going. And I think that's something that I've learned in life, is that I had so many plans and I was so regimented on exactly what I needed to do and when I needed to do it. And it didn't work out. And then that feeling of failure because I hadn't succeeded in my own very strict, and the only person who'd create these rules were myself. And I think that with this podcast and with everything that I'm doing in life, as much as I have plans and I have ideas and I have direction, and that's really important to have, I also am aware that who knows what's going to happen, just in the same way that we don't know what's going to happen with life. And I think that although I'm very much still working on this, I have made huge progress in this, and it's something that I'm really, I guess, maybe even go as far as saying a tiny bit proud of. My ability to just let things happen and see what happens, and not having to have full control over everything. And don't get me wrong, we are still at the beginning of this journey, but that is something that I'm kind of learning to live with and I'm finding a lot of peace from. So yeah, so I don't know exactly where this is going, but in terms of what I do know is that the podcast is going to be the same as it was before, 2 episodes a week. On a Monday, it is going to be with my best friend Millie, and then Thursdays, which is obviously today, is my Thursday Thoughts episodes. So it's got the same kind of structure. Mainly on Thursdays, it's going to be navigating and then a topic. So do feel free to let me know if you've got any specific topics you are interested in me talking about. I have got some planned already. And I'm hoping in the future to get some different people as well onto the podcast. I think that it's so important to use any platform for voices of all different kinds of people. I'm very aware that my voice is just one voice and my experience is just one experience. And actually, there is so much learning and growth to be done by hearing so many different voices. So I'm definitely going to be working on that and having kind of inspiring chats with inspiring people, which I'm really looking forward to. And then on Mondays, it's still with Monday mornings with Millie, but there is a slight change in the kind of setup of the topics we're going to be talking about. Obviously, when we originally started, it was all very drama school based. And although we both are still very much in the drama sphere of life, we kind of, having looked at the podcast and kind of what my vision was from when I created it, we realized that there was an even like more or like bigger space for talking a kind of a similar nature to what I'm talking about on Thursdays. And I think, from someone who spent 5 years in a psych ward and like who, when I got out, even when I really wanted to recover, it was so hard because there isn't that support in terms of life. There is definitely obviously this is like we're not even going to get onto the topic of mental health services today, but when your symptoms have been managed, what next? What keeps that recovery sustainable? And that was something that I found so hard. And I realized that like it definitely kept me as a revolving door patient for longer. And I'm sure that there are others who feel the same. And so that's kind of where the Thursday ones come from, kind of that how do you navigate adulthood and how do you navigate life after being institutionalized for so long, or even just for a short amount of time. But then having met Millie, who has not been in a psych ward for 5 years, navigating life is still tricky. It's not just something that's exclusive to those of us who've had maybe more struggles that have ended up, in hospital. Actually, life is just really hard. And so kind of coming from two very different perspectives, very different aspects of life, but also with many similarities, that is kind of where Mondays are going to be going. More of a generic, I say generic like life. It's all quite generic in terms of, but on Thursdays, focusing more on that kind of mental illness and like and neurodivergence. And then Mondays is just like the everyday challenges of being an adult. So yeah, there will be a lot of rambling because it is me. There will be a lot of me tripping over my words, but I'm hoping that this will be an authentic space. I want to show up as who I am. It is not going to be a polished professional thing because that is not who I am. And actually that is okay. And that is part of what I want to share on this podcast is actually we can't do life perfectly, but that isn't how life's meant to be done anyway. So the podcast will be coming out each Monday and Thursday, and alternate weeks there will be a short episode and a more of a longer deep dive episode. You can catch our podcast on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Apple Podcasts. And what I realised, I've just done this whole episode and completely forgot to mention the fact that we have now combined with the Be the Change Media Network. See, this is the truth of now there's an alarm going off outside. It's all quite a lot, actually. Back in the room, back in the space. Be the Change Media Network. I met Lily at a Reach Out to All event, and I'd been listening to her podcast, and I'd seen that she'd created this Be the Change Media Network. And I was going to email her, but then amazingly, we met at this event and we got talking, and she has very excitedly welcomed my podcast into the Be the Change Media Network, and I'm so excited to be part of that. And I don't know whether it will already have been out, the episode that I did with her, kind of within Be the Change Media Network. So super exciting. So you will also be able to find the podcast on all of the Be the Change Media Network places as well. So do check us out on either side, and whichever way you've come from. Hello, welcome. You are very, very welcomed into the space. So yeah, I'm gonna stop talking now because I have no idea what I'm saying, and I need to go and get some medication because it's lunchtime. So I'm gonna go do that. But I am so excited to get back started, and I've been a bit like, ADHD procrastination on this whole thing, but now I'm back into it. I'm just reminded me why I love it. So yeah, please do follow us. You can follow my personal Instagram at Legally Detained, or the podcast and the podcast, and the podcast at NLLD, the podcast. Follow the Be the Change Media Network as well for updates and some other amazing young people and the things that they're doing. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. If you've got to the end of this episode, I genuinely think you're an absolute icon. And maybe, you know, on the Instagram post, you could share an emoji. Let's have the unicorn emoji because you're an icon for getting to the end of here. And anyone who does get to the end, I actually like, are you okay? Because you've listened to the whole of me just rambling. But yeah. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. And I hope you join me and Millie on Monday and then me again next Thursday to chatting all things navigating adulthood. And yeah, thank you so much and have a lovely week. Take care. Bye bye.